Good evening. My name is John Stauner. I'm a director with the Three Lakes Community Foundation and a Forward Three Lakes volunteer. Tonight is the culmination of a process that began almost 2 years ago. After the downtown fires in 2019, we engaged with the UW Extension design team to help us as a community forge a shared vision for the future of Three Lakes. While we had planned an actual design team visit this past September, the pandemic had other plans. So we went virtual. The need was simply too great to delay. The design team has listened to us. They've collected information. They've learned about our strengths, our challenges, and where there are opportunities. They have learned who and what we are as a community. I want to thank the volunteers of the design team for the work that they have done on our behalf. Thank you to Todd Johnson, who is the state team leader, and a special thank you to Miles Alexander, our local Oneida County agent, whose countless hours, patience, and guidance has made this possible. This has been all about forging that shared vision. Tonight, we will see what that shared vision could be. The possibilities will be presented. So while tonight is a culmination of a process, it is also a beginning. And with that, I'll turn it over to the design team.
Thank you, John. And thank you for reminding me to unmute. Though it's been 14 months since we've been working together and coming up to 9 months of everything Zoom, it's still not always perfect. But we have had a good time putting things together. And Forward Three Lakes has been a wonderful group. It started with people invited by the Community Foundation. Others have joined. You've got a website up, forward3lakes.com. It's been wonderful to see how dedicated you have been to helping the community of Three Lakes develop and realize a shared vision of the future that all Three Lakes can be proud of. So thank you for the work that you've done to bring people into the process and recognizing the opportunity. And as your University of Wisconsin Extension Community Development Educator, I'll be here to help you with implementation and provide some ongoing support as you may need it. At this time, I'll turn it over to Todd Johnson, who will begin with introducing the design team and the design team concept. Todd.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to talk about Forward Three Lakes, and that's your local group who's dedicated to helping this process really come to life here in your community. It's a group of volunteers that have been working with Miles for a few months now, and they've been really putting in all the hard work to try to help us figure out who you folks are all about and how we can do our job the best we can. So as far as, you know, as far as I know, the folks there have been working really hard with Miles and helping us get organized, understand, get information when we need it in a timely manner. And hopefully they'll be there with Miles at the end of this process to help move things forward and to see these things come to fruition. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our team itself. So I'm the land use and community development specialist. I'm based out of University of Wisconsin, River Falls, and our program, Design Wisconsin, it's part of a community vitality and placemaking program, and it's offered by the University of Wisconsin Extension for communities all across the state. The whole purpose of the program is to connect communities with planning and design professionals to help draw out shared visions of the future, and to help them figure out how to make that vision become a reality. And typically, as John kind of alluded to, this process is usually a face-to-face thing, and it's really cool. And you got 3 days of public participation, and we bring 20 planning and design professionals who will stay with host families on site, and we'll visit with folks and take tours and really get to know you all. But because of COVID-19, we decided it was best to try to keep it safe and instead try to reimagine this entire process as a virtual event and try to get similar outputs, but without compromising public safety. And as far as who's part of this team, well, because we went virtual, we were able to actually reach out a little further to get some of our professional volunteers than we normally would. And so right now we've got a team of, a little over 20 planners, architects, landscape architects, as well as housing, economic development, natural resource, and community development experts from Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And like Miles and I were saying earlier, besides the two of us, the rest of everyone is volunteering their time. And so what you see here is a whole lot of folks who really do care about rural communities and trying to help Three Lakes discover its shared vision of the future. And then going on to the next slide. And so this illustration just kind of helps capture the idea of what this whole process sort of looks like from beginning to end. And so kind of reading it from left to right, the process is kind of like holding up a mirror to the community. We start by gathering as much information as possible through the community survey and interviews, the youth assessment project, children's drawings, a market analysis, and a demographic analysis. And then as part of the community survey, we ask you some questions to try to figure out what are the most important topics facing Three Lakes. And according to you, the most important things have to do with natural resources, growth and development, the downtown, housing, and leadership. So they took those topics and we set up focus group sessions for each of them. And if you remember, we provided morning, afternoon, and evening times to attend that throughout the week of October 5th, including a Saturday morning for those who couldn't participate during the weekdays. But in order to facilitate all those sessions, we had to get reinforcements from more than a dozen of our UW Extension and some UW River Falls colleagues to make that happen. And from all those sessions, we read through all the material, we summarized it the best we could, and developed a written shared vision of the future. And then we shared that with your local planning team to make sure that we got it right. And then we're going to show that to you next. So next slide. Oh, that's not the next slide. We're still getting there. Hang on. Slide 13, Miles. Well, that's okay. I'll read it to you. It kind of looks like this. Three Lakes is the gateway to the chain of lakes, a vibrant small town, downtown, and a place where our hearts feel at home. It is known as a good place for families with children. When our children grow up, they like to bring out-of-town friends to Three Lakes and show off their hometown. We are lake, forest, and downtown people. Some of us live in Three Lakes year-round. Some of us live here part of the year. Some of us are commuters, visitors, some of whom are regulars, help to fuel our local economy. We all want Three Lakes to thrive for the next generation. We have different perspectives and needs, yet we do share a vision. We know what is important and make plans to accomplish those goals. We work together to find the money, time, and talent needed to succeed. And we understand how seasonal residents, year-round residents, and visitors support each other. For example, year-round residents provide the businesses and services that seasonal residents and tourists want. They need a good school. Property taxes paid by seasonal and full-time homeowners and businesses support the school and town roads. Three Lakes is what happens when you have a nice small town with strong schools among healthy lakes within the beautiful North Woods. It is a cherished and is sustained by a variety of friendly people enjoying our unique natural environment and working together to build community. I hope I said that right. So then as we look at the shared vision that I just read is that little yellow box in the middle of that diagram. And so then moving to the right, our team of volunteers took that information and they began doing some research and design, and then trying to be true to how this whole process began and to hold up a mirror to the community, we then use those same topics from the focus groups to kind of divide our work into those topics of nature and development, downtown, housing, and leadership. So tonight, what you're going to see is hopefully what your shared vision might look like and some ideas on how to pursue it. So next, I'm going to hand it off to Aaron, and he's going to talk about the natural environment.
All right, thank you, Todd. So I'm excited to join all of you tonight. And as Todd stated, one of the things that we as a design team really benefit from is all of the work that you as a community did. And so as we dive into the natural resource topic and as we dive into future topics, one of the things that you're going to start to hear is us trying to state back to you what we heard, right? A summary of kind of the information that was provided to us as we started our process and we started in to provide some design work to the community. And so one of those questions that was asked in the focus group is, what are the major concerns? And what you're seeing here listed on the screens are concerns that are pretty universal across Lake Country. And so I had the benefit of working for UW Extension for about 10 years, working on many different lake management plans all across northern Wisconsin. And a lot of the challenges that you see here are common to lake communities, right? Concerns about development along the shoreline. Concerns about overuse of the lakes, the lack of amenities. How do we attract people to our community? So Miles, let's go ahead and jump to the next slide, which I think is equally important, is starting to recognize some of the, you skipped over one on me. Biggest opportunities, here we go. As we start to look to the future, what are the biggest opportunities for the natural environment in Three Lakes? Increasing public access to lakes and shorelines. How do we bring in the community, both visitors and residents, and how do we educate them about the health of our lake systems, about how to maintain and be good stewards of that moving forward, and also how do we guide growth and development to protect the environment and community character. So what you're going to see in the following slides is a series of ideas that we've started to pull together. But the thing that really sticks out to me is as we were doing some of our research, one of the historic images that popped up was a flyer from 1936, about seeing the North Woods in the autumn, right? And this idea that you could hop on a train in Chicago and make your way north to see Lake Country in the fall, I think is very similar to what we see today. Is it's the same basic idea of what attracts people here first. There's so many different stories of people that didn't start off as residents in Lake Country, but they started as visitors, and then they eventually became more attached to this place and more attached to the people in the community. And so what we came up with here in terms of big ideas is that we wanted to go and reiterate some of the things we heard from you. So what you're going to see here in a minute is that we started by looking at what should this relationship between the community and the lakes look like. So lakeshore restoration, access, tiered visitor experiences, these are important things. But then we also started looking for opportunities for expanding and enhancing on these opportunities. So Cy Williams Park and City Beach became certainly opportunities within all of this. And finally, also developing some trails. Miles, if you can go to the next slide for me. But one of the keys that came through all of these conversations as we dig into this topic is that there's always been this balance in the North Woods between showmanship and stewardship. People come to the lakes because it's an enjoyment, they're seeking recreation, they're seeking enjoyment, they're seeking the benefits of having these beautiful lakes and the opportunities that presents while they're there. And so as we look on the right and we stay focused on stewardship, it's the beauty of these lakes. It's the health of these lakes that has continued to attract people to this community and will continue to attract people into the future. But there's always been this element of showmanship mixed into this. And so let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. And what you're going to see in the following 3 slides is that we've gone in and we've tried to capture what we believe to be the core components of how the community relates or can relate to the lakes in the future. And so you're going to see that we've kind of built this up as a series of steps. And one of those steps that we believe is foundational to all of this is that, stewardship really begins at home, right? And it's one of those things as Lake Country has developed, as we've seen development pressure around the lakes, one of the most important things we can do is work together as citizens, as residents, to do whatever is possible in our own backyards to maintain and protect the shoreline. And so what you see on here is a series of things that are both stewardship related. So things like going in and adding bioswales or improving vegetation along the shoreline, Or as one of the programs, one of your videos pointed out to us, the fish sticks program that the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources recommends for adding structure along the shoreline, right? These are all things that can be done, but they have to be mixed in with these elements of showmanship. So things like providing outdoor gathering spaces for your family, creating swimmable areas off of your dock. Let's go ahead and jump to the next slide, please. As we continue out into the community and move beyond the private property, there's also things that the community needs to be aware of. As we started studying this, certainly access is always an issue. And this is a hotly debated topic with every lake community I've ever worked with. There's this idea that, and I'm right there with you as a recreationist, is that you don't really want all that many more people to find out about your, best kept secret. But there's the other component of this, which is that that's also part of the community. It's part of the identity. It's how you attract people. It's how partially how you support your economy. And so one of the things we want to make sure we're doing is that whenever possible, wherever we provide public access to the water, so our boat ramps, that we're also going ahead and developing these as, some place that is welcoming, that brings in some of those showmanship elements, that provides both areas for staging and loading, but also shelters and a sense of gateway to welcome people to the chain of lakes. As we move over into the next category, we call it welcome. And these are these small opportunities, the right-of-ways that exist, the small bits of public land or public right-of-way where you can actually provide opportunities for visitors and people who don't have private land access to the lakes. Where do they go and get their selfie along the lake? How do we provide for kind of these very minimal contact experiences that are really important for visitors? All right, next slide, please. And as you see, we start progressing up to more complex approaches to how the community can support this. And so we talk about gathering and creating gathering spots where people are attracted to come and create experiences, where you're actually enhancing and adding recreational amenities around the lakes is critically important. And we're going to talk about a few of these here in just a minute. But it's things like going in and adding the kind of shelters and fire pits and trailheads, but also making sure that there are public docks available so that people can meet up with their friends that are actually coming by boat to these locations and have these kind of public park experiences. And then the last component of this is where we shift over to learn. And one of the things that we heard from you as a community is it's critically important to help educate both visitors and residents about the health of the health of the watershed, health of the lakes. But in addition to that, you have to really understand the lake country landscape in order to do that. And so we're going to talk about some experiences where we can add some learning components into this as well. We can go to the next slide. And so one of those places we're going to start is here in Cy Williams Park. And again, there's a lot of detail that we can discuss and will be part of the report later on. But for tonight, I want to go ahead and recognize that we see both, a professional baseball player and architect as an inspiration within this park. And you'll see a few elements that we hope kind of tie back to the Cy Williams memory in the redesign of this park space. So let's go ahead and jump into the next slide and kind of walk through some of these. So within this model, what you're actually seeing here is all of these different components of how the community interfaces with the lakes. And so we begin with how do we really enhance that access point? So how can City Beach become an amenity that is really the centerpiece of downtown Three Lakes in terms of the relationship between visitors and the community and the lakefront, right? But we also have to add other amenities and welcome people in. We have to create opportunities for people to gather and also for places for people to learn. And so let's go ahead and jump through the next slides. So on the left-hand side of this screen, what you're going to see is the learning component. And what this is it's an interactive water feature that is intended to represent the entire chain of lakes in miniature. It's intended to be a place that, children can come and splash while their grandparents are shopping at the farmer's market. But it's intended as an interactive feature that can be supported with interpretive signage. On the right-hand side of this, what you're actually seeing here is that you're seeing a space that can serve, well, you also see the volleyball courts in the bottom of this, which was a request we heard from the high school students that provided feedback. But we also jump in and we see that the parking lot itself can actually serve as an event space. And so you see with the existing gazebo in the background there, that space can come in. Let's go ahead and jump to the next. And then the other major feature here comes down to this access. And so we were inspired by some historic photography in terms of, one of the local area camps really had extended out this swimming pier out into the lake. We see opportunities for both a swimming pier, a beach, and then also a fishing pier within the city beach area. So next slide, please. Going beyond Cy Williams Park, though, we also started talking about trails and the potential impact regionally of trails. And as we studied this, it took us a few days to actually catch on to this because this wasn't something that we heard repeatedly. But one of the things that jumped out at us is that as we were looking at kind of a regional trail network, we sat down and mapped out your amenities, looking for these natural areas that exist across this region and what we could actually start to connect up with local trail network. One of the areas that jumped out in a big way for us is the absolute, massive amenity of having Thunder Lake State Wildlife Area located very close to downtown Three Lakes. One of the things that we also discovered as we dug into this is that the master plan for that property has not been updated since 1980. And so we've got some suggestions on that in following slides. In addition to the regional trail network, we also went and had conversations about what we can do in the downtown. And so what you're seeing here within the downtown is the opportunity for adding bike rentals, the opportunity for adding or connecting into existing city parks, but also a pretty significant emphasis on access to Maple Lake. And one of the things you're going to see here is that there are four blue arrows that kind of direct from Superior Street down to Maple Lake. And what those represent is they actually represent public right-of-way that's in the original town plat for those spaces. And one of the team members pointed this out to us and said, there are a lot of lake communities I've worked in the past that would have dreamed to have these kind of natural pedestrian connections that exist between their major roadway and their lakefront. These could be developed. It's not necessarily that we have to develop all of them or it has to happen tomorrow, but long-term, this could really be turned into one of those really unique Three Lakes experiences where you could actually come in and make use of these public right-of-ways to enhance the pedestrian connections that exist within that area. Next slide. Jumping back out a little bit, we talk about, how do we kind of welcome people, and specifically visitors and those looking, maybe coming to Three Lakes for the first time. And so what you're actually seeing here is Rice Lake. Rice Lake is a protected lake within the Thunder Lake State Wildlife Area. And Rice Lake, actually, as we looked at it and had conversations with local birders within the community, one of the things they told us is that Rice Lake is an amazing resource that is very difficult to get to water's edge from the current infrastructure that's available there. This slide here is actually suggesting that that's exactly what we would like to see within this area, is an expansion of amenities that allow visitors to come out and experience Rice Lake, that allow people to get out to water's edge, to learn about the wildlife, that call this state wildlife area home, to create this as one of these, important welcoming stations within your community. Next slide. And the other opportunities are to gather. We went and mapped and we started to see that when it comes to birding, Three Lakes is a bird city, or part of the Bird City, Wisconsin program. We certainly have heard that there are a number of birders, but these opportunities to gather at these natural areas that really support birding. As you go out to about a 20-mile radius from Three Lakes, there are amazing resources here. This could really become something the community could market and attract a lot of visitors for a very different amenity than what your traditional lake users are looking for. Next slide. And finally, we come to the last slide in the natural environment team. And this goes back to, again, Thunder Lake, we recognized as this amazing opportunity, both in that you have a Northwoods Land Trust property that's on Thunder Lake, but you also have the state wildlife area, opportunities to work with DNR long-term to plan and develop environmental education resources, to create birding opportunities. What we're showing here is the potential for a platform that can get you up above some of the marshy lands, to bring up onto one of these small rises within the landscape, bring you up a structure so that you're not necessarily right at water's edge, but you would definitely get an amazing view of all the wildlife and the birds that are coming and visiting your community. And we believe that that would be a major attractor for people coming to Three Lakes. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton.
All right, I'm back. So I get to talk about growth and development. This is Todd Johnson again. So our next slide. So when we asked people in the focus group sessions about what ways would you like to see your community grow and develop, they told us they wanted a lively downtown, a year-round economy, increased access to the water, well-planned and maintained civic spaces and infrastructure to improve internet service, and more cooperation. So that sounded pretty easy. So then we jumped ahead. I'm just kidding. It wasn't easy at all. And here are some of the big ideas that came out of the process. Community stewardship, year-round economy, economic gardening and business retention and expansion, flexible business concept, and of course, broadband. And just to point out the fact that we already know that there's a couple of really major community projects that are going on, that are currently underway right now. The Aquatic Center effort started some years ago. It's a methodical process and it's part of a commitment to provide the community a recreational and therapeutic facility without cost to the taxpayers. And so we want to keep supporting that process. And then there's a big motivation for the Forward Three Lakes project to work with the Extension Design Wisconsin program in recovery from the loss of a diner and the OV. And that local investors are working on a new hotel right now with some of the amenities of the Oneida Village Inn, and the town paid for a hotel feasibility study with results expected soon. So we just want to recognize that there's some really good work already going on in your community. We want to support it, and if you guys weren't already doing this, we probably would have been suggesting it. So congratulations to you all, and I hope that you continue to support those efforts. And now we're going to move forward to the next slide. And so one of the ideas that we want to kick around here is this idea about community stewardship. So we heard from a lot of folks who had so many wonderful memories about growing up on the chain of lakes, and they all had this sort of responsibility to provide those experiences for their friends and family and visitors. And they took a lot of pride in keeping those places looking and feeling good and keeping them up. And so we started thinking about how we can apply that same sort of can-do attitude and stewardship to the entire community. And so I want you to start thinking about like Three Lakes as having a front yard and a backyard, places that we share with one another in our civic and public lives, but have slightly different ways in which we use them. So going on to the next slide. So if you think of your downtown, it's more than just a collection of businesses in one location. I mean, downtowns typically are the spaces that represent a community's character, history, and values. So if you think of the downtown as our front yard, it's a place that we share with our neighbors and visitors. It's a place that we want to look really nice and feel good about ourselves because it's a place that we want to be proud of and remembered by. And so if we think of our downtown as that front yard experience, and then moving on to the next slide. So it is our response. It's everyone's responsibility to take care of our downtown, just as it is to take care of the lakes. And so like our front yard, the downtown should be attractive and welcoming. It should serve its residents and visitors alike and create positive and unique experiences by which people will remember Three Lakes. Some ways in which we can, encourage this type of development or encourage good stewardship is trying to come up with some carrots, trying to find ways in which we can offer folks who are doing the right thing some support. So maybe it's offering low interest loans or grants, or just a helping hand with some volunteerism to help fix up some storefronts. But whatever it might be, to help encourage those activities and those businesses and things that happen in the downtown, that they really do look good and that we're all proud of it, and that it really does serve us well. In the next slide. So then if we think about the downtown being the front yard, let's start thinking about Maple Lake as being our backyard. So we know what the chain of lakes is amazing, and it's so unique. And Maple Lake, unfortunately, is cut off from the rest of them, but it has the distinct honor of being the lake of the downtown. And so if we start thinking of it as the downtown's backyard, in which all of our Three Lakers can share it as a community gathering space and be just this unique sort of extension of the downtown. And then the next slide. And so we have this Maple Lake has this potential of becoming Three Lakes backyard, and it can be a place that we can use for celebrations in the water throughout the year for all different sorts of educational programs, entrepreneurship, promotional activities, and just opportunities just to really feel good about our community and to feel good that we all have this gift of living on the lake. Next slide. And so then one of the other pieces that came out of this was this idea of how do we develop a year-round economy? And there's a couple of things to consider here. And one is economic gardening, which is this concept of really taking care of the businesses that you already have and helping nurture them. And so it's much like growing, a plant or a garden, is that you need to tend to it. You can't just let folks do their thing. You got to be able to communicate with local businesses and find out, what do they need, what's working well for them, how can we help them, and then think of ways in which we can work with them to expand or improve their businesses. So it's a philosophy about not taking taking for granted what we already have and really pouring ourselves into those assets and making the best of it. In the next slide. And we already know that like tourism is a really big part of this economy, but we also want to think about like of tourism, what are those things that we can use to hook future residents who might want to stay here all year round? And so try to think about a variety of activities that might attract a variety of people. And what are some of the things that we're doing well that we can continue to do well, but where are some of those opportunities that we maybe haven't looked at? Either it's a different type of activity that we're not used to accommodating, or it's just a seasonal thing that we haven't been thinking about. And then another important aspect to all this, and we're going to cover this in much greater detail later on, is housing. How do we develop the housing needs that would enable us to have a year-round economy? Because right now we're really struggling to be able to provide that housing for the working class and for folks who want to come here and start a family. And we have limited housing available for limited types of folks. And so we want to be able to like offer this entire suite of housing that enables us to really be successful moving forward. So, and then the next slide gets at how we might kind of expand what we normally would do for tourism and have year-round community activities and programs that are not just for tourists, but for our community residents themselves. And so one of the things that we know is that we can spend a lot of time and energy and money developing programs for tourism, but if we develop programs for ourselves, we actually, not only do we increase our own quality of life, but we'll actually contribute to bring in more tourists as well. So try to think of ways in which we can develop year-round activities that benefit all folks who have an interest in the chain of lakes. And then again, to support our existing and prospective business owners and try to figure out how we can help them make the most of what they have already. And we move on to the next slide. And then one of the concepts we want to float out there for you folks is this idea of this flexible business concept. The fact that, starting a business is really difficult, but maybe there are different ways in which we could start a business. We can start from the very small with a food stand or a food truck, or in this case, maybe a food boat, something that floats on the water. And then think of ways in which that might be something that just starts off at maybe special events or seasonal, and then over the time it becomes more successful, and it might turn into a catering service, and maybe it eventually ends up being a permanent location and has a restaurant. But in turn, those restaurants can then start developing and expanding their businesses to include a food cart or a food boat, or it can expand the idea and it can keep on moving. And so it's this idea that business doesn't have to be thought of as just one particular concept or one brick and mortar building. It can be a whole lot of different things, and it can move and change shape and adapt to whatever the certain needs are of the community at different times. And move on to the next one. And this slide has to do with the fact that we have, few months out of the year in Wisconsin where it gets cold and we get this white stuff. And so we should be starting to think about, how does this downtown and the backyard, how's the front yard and backyard look like in the winter? And what does our backyard in the winter look like? And what are the things that we can do? And so think about introducing activities that would in addition to snowmobiles and ice fishing, like ice skating loops and warming huts, and having art on the lake, and food and beverage carts and huts. And so this map that we have there on the screen kind of shows where some of those things might be located. And those pictures above just give you some ideas of what it might look like. And the next slide. And then the other thing is that maybe it could all culminate in this huge winter festival type thing. It doesn't have to be huge. It could start off very small, but the idea of having an activity for yourselves in the wintertime. And if other people want to come, they can come and join in the celebration, but think about what you as Three Lakers want to have in a community winter festival. And, think about how to make it family friendly, how to enjoy being outside in the winter and being on the lake. And we have lots of different ideas here, everything from pond hockey to colored lights on the ice and fire pits in the park. So lots of different ideas. And the next slide kind of shows what it might look like. This illustration just shows some night skating going on some trails on the lake, some snowmobiling off in the distance, and a hot air ballooning going out right on the lake. And then this following slide here is just a reminder that, the chain of lakes is really unique. And what are some of the programs and activities and even business ventures that we might come up with to help capitalize off this while strengthening that idea? And so consider how the chain of lakes changes throughout the season and how it changes character from the downtown to Rice Lake, and how it changes from the different types of access that different lakes have, and that each lake has probably its own character and traditions. And then think about how you might have ideas that would promote each of those things and each of those lakes, and at the same time connect them. So some of the ideas that we're kind of floating around here might be developing some badges and stickers, maybe a photo contest that represents all the different lakes, or an annual calendar featuring the different lakes, or sharing stories with one another, and just creating new memories of the chain of lakes that we can use not just as a way of promoting our, for tourism, but promoting to ourselves and reminding ourselves who we are and why we love this place so much. And then the next slide here. Broadband. So yes, it is something that we all value, especially now that we've been experiencing COVID. We all know how important having reliable and affordable and accessible broadband internet is. We know there's quite a few frustrations around here that we have limited capacity right now. But the purpose of this effort from our team's aspect is just to remind how important it is, and that having high quality broadband is important not just for education and for tourism, but also for local businesses and for really being able to offer new ways of doing business and new ways of communicating and working with one another. One of the really fun ideas that we've been seeing in other parts of the state is coffee shops that expand because of their Wi-Fi to be able to enable entrepreneurs to have startup businesses by just being able to provide workspace places, and things like that could probably happen at the Deja Brew if we had really good high-speed internet in the downtown. And so one of the things to consider is how can we work together as a community to keep our eye on the ball on this topic, and to work with the Oneida County Economic Development Corporation and its efforts, and to try to come up with creative ways of providing internet in the downtown and in our public spaces that visitors and residents can take advantage of, and ways in which we can help assure that we can provide this as a service to our community in the long run. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to downtown, which is Karina, right?
Yes, thank you,
All right.
Todd. All right. Next slide. Thanks, Miles. So when we talked about downtown in the focus groups, we asked two questions. So the first was, what do you love about downtown Three Lakes? And what we heard from people is that downtown Three Lakes is a beautiful place to be. It's attractive. It's a full service community that has retained its unique character and its sense of community. And when we asked what people hoped to see in Three Lakes in 2030, the general wishes were for a vibrant, pedestrian-friendly community that is interspersed with public gathering and green spaces and connected to the lake and surrounding natural areas. There was a desire to, without changing the look of town too much, wanting to see a new hotel, some additional unique stores, and more restaurants. So with that in mind, we came up with some of the big ideas for downtown are as follows. Activating storefront spaces, wayfinding, activating underused spaces, developing landmarks, and then an artisan mixed use development. And I'll talk more about each of those in turn. So activating underused spaces. So Todd just talked about how downtown is our front yard. And our downtown buildings are one way that we welcome people into our community. And our storefronts really are the welcome mat. It's the first thing that people see, and it makes a lasting impression of our community. One thing that our team noticed is that many of the downtown buildings sit back from the road, which gives us an opportunity to place some chairs and benches, trees and other plantings, make some pet-friendly areas, even have lawn games out there, and have some great opportunities for outdoor seating for restaurants. So by activating these front yards, we can really make a sense of vitality, which also then helps draw our visitors from one end of downtown to the other. So it helps us to connect the spaces. And on the next slide, we can show you a specific example of something that we came up with. So developing an iconic bench that can be placed every few blocks will really help to provide some visual interest, while also marking the path through downtown. So as people are working their way through town, they're going to see this bench, it kind of draws their attention, and then you see it farther down, and it encourages you to keep walking to see what's next. So you may notice the bench looks a bit like a blue jay, which was intentional. The design is based on the mascot, the school mascot. It is intended to be created at the Fab Lab. So it is relatively easy to make. It can be easily disassembled to be stored, and also is something that could be available for sale. So it could be a fundraiser as well, if that is of interest. The next slide here talks a bit about wayfinding. So we don't want to just rely on our benches to help us pull people through town. We also want to make it a bit more explicit. So what we're showing here on this map is just a couple of details of calling out some of those specific landmarks. So we have Cy Williams Park, which Aaron talked about, some additional things there that we're looking to do. I have on here a few things I'll talk about in a moment, some downtown gateways, we have trail connections, things like that. These are all things that we would call out on our wayfinding. So with wayfinding, it's really developing a key symbol that is seen throughout town, and then we have different types of signage that we can use to call attention to different amenities, towards parking. We have a suggested location for a parking lot, just so visitors know where they are allowed to park. And we can use this to help tell a story as well. So it's really about helping people find their way through town, and also it's a way to help kind of share the history of the community as well through signage. We can also tie this in to that learning piece that Aaron talked about with our natural environment. That can be tied into the wayfinding as well. And then what you see here, this image is just a proposed badging that could be used to showcase the chain of lakes with that, to kind of help mark those places that are of special interest. So as I mentioned, we have a couple ideas for landmarks, and I'll start with the ones that are creating places from existing spaces. So for gateways, we want it to be really clear to people when they arrive in downtown that they have arrived somewhere special. So we have identified 2 different spaces to put some gateways in. So the first, you'll see that kind of calls your attention right away, is this vintage snowmobile look here that we have. So this is right at, sorry, this is at that, the bend in the road right downtown. And this is intended to be a great photo opportunity for people. It's kind of the fun, kitschy option that we're pitching. There could be some more serious art here as well. This is just something that would be really fun to have. The other suggestion that we're making is to do a mural project, and this would be hopefully on the side of the hardware store. We noticed that there's a large, relatively blank wall. So proposing either something just with some large text or choosing a historical image to recreate something to really tell the history and also let people know that they have arrived in Three Lakes. So going on to the next slide, this is another example of creating places from existing spaces. So this is the former Tree Hugger building, and a member of our team reimagined this as what we're calling the depot. And so this would be a site for a bicycle and ski rental or store, and also a tap room. So a good way to kind of draw in that connection to the trail and help draw people into the edge of downtown as well. So again, this is reusing a building that's already there and is vacant, and just an idea that would help bring in some additional people. On the next slide, we have an idea that was originally shared by the high school students that shared some ideas with us as part of this project. And on here you'll see, so this is a pocket park, and this is at the site of the former diner. And so what we're showing here is a couple different things. So you'll see in the middle we have this stormwater runoff water feature. And it's really just overall a flexible plaza space to really be able to host events. It gives people a place to gather. We heard from the focus groups that having some additional public green space downtown was really important. And it not only helps connect downtown to its natural environment, it's just really important to have a place to gather. So you will also see here, you might notice this big screen in the back, and that was also a request from the students. They suggested having a inflatable movie screen to do movie nights, potentially as a fundraiser. And this is just a great location to do that. It's right in downtown, something that would be easy to set up and take down. So here we were able to take two of the ideas that the students have that were fantastic ideas and work them into the downtown area. On the next slide, again, just continuing to really activate and connect the spaces that we have. So this just shows some formal and informal pathways, some different activity locations, really looking at opportunities for more temporary businesses, places that we could do some pop-ups, really focusing on where are there spaces between buildings, and where are there spaces that our existing buildings could use those spaces that are next to them. Looking especially at where we have parking lots and how can we put those to a higher use on occasion. So you'll see some different spaces marked for that, and I'll talk a bit more about what some of those options might be in just a little bit, but some of those examples, which Todd set up a little bit, is that proof of business concept test, right? So just wanting to set up a booth for a little bit to see if this business idea is going to go somewhere. So the opportunity to test something out before investing in a full storefront. And just being able to try things on. So that's kind of the thought here, is finding those places where that is an option. And then on the next slide, kind of building on that connection piece, really needing to focus on how people are moving through downtown with a look at safety. So Erin shared some great designs for Cy Williams Park. In order to really connect things, we need to have a way for people to safely get from Cy Williams Park into downtown. So one of the members of our team did some great work here looking at crosswalk improvements. And so what we see here, we've got some bump outs here, which are going to force traffic to slow down, and it also shortens the distance of travel for pedestrians. And so this one is looking specifically at the intersection of Cy Williams Park, so to help get people downtown. And then the next slide shows an example at a four-way intersection where that one has been modified. So this is at Superior and School Street. So you can see what that would look like as well. So again, just making sure that pedestrians, as we are inviting more people into our downtown, we want to make sure that they are able to feel comfortable walking around downtown and moving around safely. If we go to the next slide, so as we were talking about different ways that we can activate our underused spaces, there's kind of like, there's a variety of ways we can do that. So one of those is events, and we've got images here of everything from like we showed that pop-up movie theater to having yoga in the park or yoga on the frozen lake or different arts events. There's super temporary installations. My favorite one on here is the snow slide. I think that would be fantastic to see downtown. And then there's more like semi-permanent things. So setting up a mini golf course in a parking lot, or any just slightly more permanent things, but there's still things that can be easily taken down. And they're just different ways to really activate a space in ways other than parking. So just some ideas. These are things that while there might be a slight investment, they can be relocated if that space is needed for future development. So these are great ideas to use in a vacant lot or a space that is not being used right now, but might become usable for something in the future. So it's kind of a good use for now. And then on the next slide, we give some more examples of what some of those things might be. So looking specifically at food businesses. So we heard the request for more restaurants, and as Todd talked about, kind of that proof of concept idea. So we recommend starting with looking at bringing in some food trucks at specific sites, which may turn in then to having a group of food trucks somewhere. So starting with like a lemonade cart or a sandwich truck at the beach or a taco and churro truck downtown can grow into a grouping of food trucks at the bank parking lot. Those are all really great ways to test the need or the desire for additional dining in Three Lakes. The winery could create a food truck plaza behind their building. And that could bring in things for special events. And, as we go through all of this, eventually one or two of those might open as a full-scale restaurant in the downtown. So really encouraging that flexible model of businesses to see what comes from that. And if we go to the next one, so another thing about pop-ups, talking about how things can be very temporary. This is just what it might look like to activate an existing space in the town by temporarily closing off one block. So if you were to close off one block of East School Street, this is what that might look like. This is something that could be done for a weekend, a day, whatever that might be. And then the last thing, there was talk of wanting more unique shops in downtown. And what we found from our research is that Three Lakes is home to many, many artists and artisans, and most of them work out of their home. And so one thing that we looked at is this idea of growing the market concept and adding activity at a central downtown location. The energy that they would generate on market days then helps to set the stage for a more permanent collection. So what you're seeing here on this map, we have this phase one is a small interior lot that's vacant, where we could do a cluster of small carts, small like tiny homes, but for artisans. That would kind of be like the first phase of it. Then we could move up to a phase two if that was really successful, where we have more of a permanent structures put in place, kind of like that top image. And then if that goes really well, and there's been a lot of energy around this, there is a possibility for that larger property that we have marked as phase three. If you'll go to the next slide. We have a very extensively thought out proposal here for phase 3. And so this is essentially an artist colony that we have designed. So not only does it have studio rentals and an event space, there's also space for retail. There's multifamily housing that is included in this. There's even a zip line that goes through the woods. So again, this is really a sky's the limit concept, but just looking at ways that we could really bring something unique to Three Lakes that builds on the artisan and artistry that already exists in Three Lakes and the North Woods, and really bring that into the downtown in a way that creates an additional reason for people to come visit. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Carl to talk about housing.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Carl Green, and I am the Community Development Educator with La Crosse County. And I will try to talk about some of the housing, both issues and opportunities for Three Lakes. Housing is on just about every community's mind, I think, unless you have an overabundant supply of housing and very few people that are wanting to purchase it, you're going to have a housing issue. Really what makes housing affordable is the supply of housing. And more often than not, and as a lakes community, you probably very well understand that it's the demand for housing that makes it expensive, and in particular, lake frontage homes are in very short supply, very high demand, and they are very expensive. That has an interesting impact, I believe, on the construction trade in your area, and it has an impact then coincidentally on the housing in your area. When we had asked in some of the focus groups, what does the housing in Three Lakes say about who we are, or what is it that you want to see in housing? It's really what does the housing in Three Lakes say about who we are as well as whose we want to be. What it really, we heard is that people care about each other. They want their housing to be appropriate and affordable housing options for people regardless of their age, regardless of their income. That they care for the environment, that care is reflected by the design of materials for new residential construction, that there are starter homes for young people, and that existing homes are rehabbed when appropriate. Next slide, please. Some of the big ideas that we're going to be talking about are life cycle of housing. This is really this concept of having housing of different types, different qualities, different sizes that really fits different life cycles of people. Oftentimes what happens is we get a pretty standardized style and or size type of house, and that our communities get filled with that, and then people have to try to make that type of housing work for them. And so we're going to show some ideas of a variety of types of housing that meets different life cycles for people. We're also going to talk about infill development. The town of Three Lakes, as you probably know, is a 99 square mile area, and land availability probably isn't the issue, but land availability where it can be served by either a sewer and water district or some sort of connection that's close by is very difficult. And so we are focusing on the Three Lakes sewer and water sanitary district and looking at infill in that area. We're also going to be talking about some strategic partnerships that the Three Lakes area can try to engage in. We'll give you some examples of housing and housing styles and some types of resources that you could potentially connect in the near future. Next slide, please. So this slide helps to illustrate life cycle housing, and it really shows a variety of types of designs that help to take into account different life cycles that people might be in their in their stage of life. There's a lot of things associated with housing that we can control in regards to cost. And one of the probably biggest of those is size. If we can start to encourage and look at reasonable size development, and we're talking 750 to 1,000 square feet, what that does is it helps to meet many different life cycle stages for people. You can house young workers, you can house starter families, retirees, and maybe even a potential market of people that want to get away to the Three Lakes area, but they don't necessarily need to be right on the water. They could bring their boat, they could access water, they could access the chain of lakes. There's a variety of lakes they can go to, but they don't necessarily have to be right on the water. And if there was development that had the that sort of right size where it's 750 to 1,000 square feet, there could be use for just a wide variety of different types of buyers and potential even renters. All communities should provide a variety of housing choices in order to meet the existing and future housing demands of its current residents and potential residents. And the life cycle housing assures that everyone who wants a place to live in Three Lakes can live in Three Lakes. Consider all the different types of housing and ownership options that different people need at different stages of their life. And work with major employers, lenders, realtors, and builders to identify future housing needs. So as I said when I started, we are really trying to focus some on the infill abilities of the Three Lakes Sanitary District. The map that is on the slide, which we can provide in a larger scale, obviously this is a little hard to read for many, but it illustrates the parcels that are considered residential parcels in the Three Lakes Sanitary District. And it puts a color to them based on the value of those parcels, based on their assessed value. In the Three Lakes Sanitary District, there are 287 residential parcels. Interestingly, 181 of the 287, or about 63%, either have no building on them, or they have a building that's under $10,000 in value. So how do we encourage redevelopment or even just development on some of these open parcels within the sanitary district? The benefit of this is that the sanitary district has some infrastructure in place. Some of it, as we heard in some of our listening sessions, has been improved. Some of it yet needs to be improved. But the existing infrastructure reduces some of the costs of construction if you're not having to put in a well and a separate septic system. And it allows for a little bit denser type of design in the either neighborhoods or the subdivision or the area that you're developing. Local housing uses or issues are a mix of issues. High-end housing for adjacent properties is very, very common, I think, in and around any place that borders a lake. Again, this is due to the demand. I think a lot of the local construction probably meets that capacity. And so in order to find a contractor or somebody that's going to be willing to build some of the smaller stuff, it's very hard because you're competing against those larger homes, those lake homes. And so really, how do you start to get enough design ability or demand by people so that the contractors start to look at that as an option? And perhaps you start to get contractors that actually come up with that style of design, the smaller design, more compact designs as their niche. They'll only do that if there's an adequate market for that. And it's a chicken and the egg type of a thing. There's not an adequate market and there's not contractors that are building it. How do we also convince some of the people on these vacant lots to possibly start to sell those vacant lots? How do we get the push of those vacant lots into the market so that they can be developed on when there's so many that are not developed on? Next slide, please. The graph I have here illustrates the Three Lakes Sanitary District's residential value ranges. And you can see very few homes are in the 150 to 200,000 and above. And again, as I said, 63% rest in the two columns on the left, either unimproved lots or lots with improvements under $10,000. So there are challenges here, obviously. We need to figure how to fix up existing homes, and yet only to a point where it makes sense to do that. Some homes, either because of poor construction materials or the dilapidated nature of them, need to simply be replaced. And truly, there aren't enough homes to improve to meet the demand for housing that we see in the area. Many lots are owned by adjacent homeowners who enjoy having a large lot, and yet that lot is its own individual parcel and could be developed on. And many downtown homes, as we heard, are rental. Next slide. This graph illustrates some of the homes that are sold in the Three Lakes town. And so we're looking at the entire town here. And the upper portion is the homes that are sold on the open market. The lower portion is homes that are not sold in what's considered a market sale. And that can be a lot of different types of sales. It can be a property that's transferred between family members. It could be transferred into a trust. It could be transferred between ownership partners if a couple of different partners own the property. It could be foreclosed on. But the point here really is to show that while there's a large volume of properties sold in Three Lakes, a very small portion of those are actually sold on the open market, where you have a willing buyer and a willing seller. And there's something to be said about that, and should probably be tried to explore a little bit further of what is the reason for that. Is the market so tight that it's you don't even need a realtor, because somebody just by word of mouth is able to sell it to somebody else, and it's not really exposed to the full market pressure. Next slide, please. So we looked at Three Lakes, and we saw that there are actually, while there are challenges, there are also very many strengths. Many vacant lots, underused lots within the sanitary district. I mean, that really is, while it's maybe a bit of a conundrum of how do we change that, it's something that is unique, I think, and isn't always the case. If you had structures that were already existing and they had less than desirable uses, let's say dilapidated rental, or they were being used for any other type of use, you have then a difficult run trying to get that property into a better use, especially if the property is dilapidated. Where you have no structures standing there, you are potentially one owner away from getting that lot to be developed. And so the vacant lots or underutilized lots within the sanitary district really is a strength for Three Lakes. Also, there's very flexible zoning in Three Lakes, and while it's county zoning, it's shared between the town and the county. And what the town is favoring, we think that the county is probably going to be favorable to that. And so that flexible zoning will allow for different types of development and possibly unique uses that we're hopefully going to be proposing here in a second. There's also an active housing task force with relationships with developers. Oftentimes, they might not even have any sort of task force regarding housing, and those steps have already been met in Three Lakes. Three Lakes also has several property management companies, a desirable quality of life for incoming residents, and obviously your robust tourism. Some of the challenges that we've looked at and noticed: a lack of affordable long-term rentals, few available homes in the sanitary district. Again, it's sort of that other side of the coin of the vacant lots and underutilized lots. You need to capture available real estate. There's high costs of development outside of the sanitary district. You know, every home is going to need its own sanitary system and its own well. A lack of housing for seniors ready to downsize, little interest in small projects for regional developers, housing task force that needs more critical stakeholder participation, and a limited capacity of local builders. Next slide, please. So some of the strategic partnerships that Three Lakes could look at that would help to increase the capacity of the housing task force include town and county officials. Look at partnering with the Oneida County Economic Development Corporation, create a development authority possibly to help work on purchasing and redeveloping vacant land in the sanitary district as it becomes available. And as we say, as it becomes available, really the development authority could help to work on this, on the owners to help make that become available, to encourage them that there's a better use for these properties. They could host a developer roundtable to identify possible incentives for development and to continue to support and advocate flexible zoning and subdivision regulations to increase density where appropriate. While this is sort of it looks like Abbey Road cover from the Beatles album, it's actually kind of illustrates the styles and the different people that we're trying to meet with our housing uses. Skiers that are coming to the area, the workers from the cranberry bogs, just your average worker and your office worker. Next slide, please. So as vacant parcels become available in Three Lakes, it's important to make the most of these opportunities, particularly on lots that can support multifamily housing. And then in conjunction with the development authority, funds can be raised to recapture these parcels. Funding from a variety of sources could be considered, including leveraging funds from local and regional nonprofits such as Habitat for Humanity, your community foundation, an organization called NeighborWorks, which is a kind of a multi-state organization, as well as state and federal programs such as WEDC, and even private donations, both of land and capital. Sometimes there can be quite a bit of success from people that are wanting and share that vision of getting more development in your community. Next slide, please. And then what we would recommend is to try to create opportunities where you subdivide and combine lots to create opportunities for that needed housing. The lot layout that's sort of in the middle bottom section of this illustrates a design style that allows for construction of larger homes, middle-sized homes, even smaller homes, and then it also shares some of the construction costs, which would be in this case a driveway in that back portion of the lot, and it sort of helps to share some of those expenses. Anytime that with construction you can share some of the expenses, again, if it's roofing walls, such as in townhomes, or in this illustration in the driveway, that helps to reduce that per unit cost, and it helps to provide a variety of sizes as well. Currently, zoning likely doesn't allow a lot to be divided as proposed, but if it were zoned multifamily or one of the within one of the business districts, this could probably work as a condominium form of ownership. So that again would be something that you could potentially work with the Oneida County to see if there's any potential on changing zoning in some of these areas to allow this style of development. Next slide, please. There are many ways to add more home options in the town. These cottages increase options for retired people and they're more affordable. And cottage style developments such as this that we're illustrating in these two examples doesn't necessarily have to be, or excuse me, in the example on the left, it doesn't necessarily have to be just for retirees. This might be attractive housing, again, for young workers, for young families, and again, for those people that maybe want to purchase a place in the North Woods, but they don't want to pay lakefront property values for it. And the people that would live in a place like this would have the ability to come up, to utilize it. They could use any or access any of the lakes in the area, and yet they wouldn't be paying sort of that lakefront property value for that accessibility to the area. Next slide, please. There are many ways to add a secondary home on an already developed lot. The garage conversion, obviously the addition, or the what we call the cottage style, which is sort of that back home or granny flat type of a style. There is just a variety of opportunities in some of these smaller structures to create that housing, again, for that life cycle of people that are not necessarily looking for that home that they're going to raise all their kids in, but have either retired or just starting out, or are working on trying to find a new place that they could have as a home in the North Woods. Next slide, please. So earlier we showed a possible way to develop sites as a potential artisan cluster. Here's another option. This is at the corner of Anderson Street and the Three Eagle Trail. This is actually a vacant lot, and we called it the Three Greens Cottage Cluster at Anderson Street. There are 3 open spaces, which we are terming the Three Greens, and then we have small houses clustered around them. There are a total in this development of 16 units with detached garage. We have minimal space between units. One design is a 2-bedroom, that's 900 square feet. The second is a single bedroom with a sleeping loft, 700 square feet. Both designs have a small entry deck and screened porch, and they have detached garages, again, allowing people that ancillary space to park boats, to park stuff that they need for everyday living, but it's not necessarily tied to the house or directly adjacent to the house. Next slide, please. In this example, there are 2 24-unit 2.5-story buildings with a shared entrance with an elevator and central stairs. Each building has an enclosed stair at both ends. On the main floor, the 12 units are 775 square feet. Second 12-level units are 775 square feet with 420 square foot lofts. And then in the northwest of the property, there are 4 to 6 townhome units. These may be 2-story or even 3-story with a garage on the main level. And again, what this is making use of is sort of that shared space. When you have shared sides or shared roofs, you're really reducing your cost per square footage and making it more affordable. And these are in addition to having those shared spaces, but they're also at a size that would be affordable based on, even if they're built to a very high quality. Next slide, please. Some other opportunities for mixed incomes. This is north of Anderson Street at West School Street. What we're trying to capture here at this open parcel is the potential for lake views. This was a 2-level townhouse development with 12 units of 2,400 square foot maximum, above parking and grade level entrances with a bonus room. They have elevated decks and they offer distance lake views. Vehicular access is through a tunnel to either a center motor court serving 8 double garages. Placing the garages on the ground or lower floors elevates the living areas for the views, capitalizing on the views of the water. And obviously, if you're putting the garage at ground floor and not having a basement, that reduces expenses as well. Next slide. We're also suggesting to encourage mixed-use infill development downtown. This is an example, Nelson and Superior, adjacent to the visitor center and the park, depicts a retail storefront main building with units stepping back to expose the park area and a promenade to the lake and the alley. The space provided in the front due to the design step backs becomes an open plaza or a sort of a meeting area. This is a 2-level housing above retail with balconies for, again, that park or lake view. Next slide. This slide just helps to link some of the federal and state resources that could be considered with regard to some financing options, as well as even lender state WIDA lender connections, and even the Wisconsin Towns Association that might have some programming available. Next slide, please. And a couple of other regional, county, and local housing resources. Oneida County is a member of the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. They have a wealth of data and plans at their fingertips and provide a variety of programs and services regarding economic development, comprehensive land use planning, and transportation ideas. Habitat for Humanity Northwoods Wisconsin is in this area and serves Oneida County. They provide homeownership opportunities for income qualified households who are unable to obtain traditional financing. They usually have some sort of partner households that require some form of sweat equity or assistance with their construction. And then the nonprofit NeighborWorks out of Green Bay, which is the local NeighborWorks. They primarily serve the greater Green Bay area, but could provide some services in the rest of the state, including Oneida County. They offer counseling and education services, homeownership lending, and can serve as a model for creative housing renovation and construction projects and partnerships. Regarding the county, the need for affordable workforce housing is obviously intertwined with economic development, and perhaps Oneida County Economic Development Corporation would have the potential to be a partner in some of the town level housing development efforts that you might embark on. UW Extension is obviously already partnering with the town on this design team effort, but should also be viewed as a resource partner as you move forward on the implementation efforts. Besides having a wealth of land-related information and maps available, Oneida County Planning and Zoning seems like a true partner for development in your town, valuing and relying very much on the town input for county zoning decisions on conditional use permits, variances, or zoning map amendments. This can lead us to believe that the projects that the town supports are going to be likely ultimately approved by the county, as they would be happy, hopefully, to work with the town on coordinating permitting, reviewing processes if the town were to adopt town level design ordinance, which the design team recommends that you consider. The county zoning ordinance also has provisions that are highly supportive for a variety of potential housing developments, such as no minimum dwelling unit size requirements and the allowance of accessory dwelling units in conjunction with single family residents. Both your business districts allow residential development with no maximum density restrictions and very small setbacks from roads and lot lines, all of which really allows for that flexible housing development. Your town has a community foundation. This is unusual and very impressive. It speaks to how much you care about your town. You also have an array of organizations, businesses, nonprofits, and people that can help you achieve your goals. With that, I'll hand it over to the leadership side.
Thank you, Carl. This is Miles Alexander back again with your Oneida County Economic Community Development Educator. When we asked people about leadership, we asked, what do you want the reputation of Three Lakes to be? They indicated they want to be seen as a community where people take care of and support each other, a community that cultivates ideas and leadership, particularly among youth, a community that is physically well cared for, and a place that gets things done. I've heard that a lot in the last 2 years. And people want Three Lakes to be a community where people are willing and happy to lend a hand. So we have some big ideas that came out of that. We see that you have an abundance of leaders. It's easy to see the many people in leadership positions. And often we don't recognize that everyone has some leadership opportunities and responsibilities in every group they're a part of. It might not be an official leadership position, but everyone has gifts to take some kind of leadership role in a group. You might be the person that, when we can hug, hugs. You're the person that welcomes. You're the person that always takes notes. Everyone has some leadership potential. There's also leadership related to the water. In a way, no matter where you live in Three Lakes or how long you are in Three Lakes, you all live on the water. The lakes are why Three Lakes is where it is at and why you are there now. And people enjoy the lakes in many different ways in all seasons. And all of us that do can take care of the lakes in many ways. And that was made clear earlier in the natural environment portion of the presentation. The third big idea is that we need to collaborate to achieve common goals. Think of how you started events and accomplished things in the past. Some that I just made a quick list of. The shootout and fly-in, fish sticks in the lakes, the Center for the Arts, Three Eagle Trail, the club snowmobile trails, the Demer Library renovation and addition. You won the Best Little Town in America competition. You have a community garden. There's the Aqua Devils. And as Carl just mentioned, the Community Foundation, which is a wonderful, unique asset. The dog park is now there. You've got the Writer Center. You made cemetery improvements. There's a Three Eagle Half Marathon and much more you could add to the list. Consider the projects that are underway and the collaborations that they require. There's a variety of people working hard to get a new downtown hotel. And there's all the people that have been working carefully for, I don't know, 5, 6 years now to get an aquatic center that is self-financed and not a burden on the community, but an asset. And now, tonight, you have the beginning of a shared vision for Three Lakes. You can see what it could look like. With a little more work, you can take that guiding star of your shared vision, make it really your shared vision, and use it as a collaboration rally cry. So I want to take just a moment to talk about the attributes to look for and to nurture in the kind of collaborative leaders you're going to need. First, patience. Leaders are going to need a clear direction and a flexible approach. And you need to be patient because things are going to change, and you need to be able to stick with it and be able to move with the changes. There needs to be a commitment to group decision making and making decisions that are informed by data, both from people on the ground, your neighbors and visitors, your business people, and the reliable, unbiased sources that you can get from a major research university, for example, with Extension's help. Collaborative leaders need to be insightful and proactive thinkers. They need to be tenacious, as I mentioned. It's related to patience. The ability to take the long view and keep and pursue the results that achieve the common purpose in spite of changing circumstances. Collaborative leaders need to build relationships with new partners, to find sponsors and allies ahead of the need, and be willing to find those relationships in unexpected places among people that might not be seen as leaders now. And a collaborative leader needs to accept conflict. It's a part of the work. They need to be able to resolve conflict, to use conflict as an opportunity, to have the difficult conversations needed to reach new possibilities. So other ideas to keep in mind. You need people to continue to give to Three Lakes. They will give time, money, and other resources to the degree they feel they are part of Three Lakes and are part and can be proud of what Three Lakes is and who you are and who they are as a part of Three Lakes. It may be that year-round residents have more motivation and can more easily provide the continuity to cultivate leadership, civic participation, and business and organization succession planning. Yet seasonal and part-time residents can't be discounted, and they aren't off the hook when they are away. Many of them participated in the focus groups and other conversations during the Design Wisconsin process. During the pandemic, we've had our glitches here a little bit early in this presentation, but we're learning how to work together even when we aren't in the same room. The presenters are scattered across Wisconsin and reaching to Indiana. Finally, bridge the divides. Stitch the frayed edges of a community together. Find common ground. It isn't either town or lake, it's town and lake. It isn't visitor and permanent resident, it's everyone who loves and cares about Three Lakes. It's going to have to take collaboration to reach the goals that are inspired by your shared vision. So who are Three Lakes leaders? Well, it's anyone who lives, works, or plays in Three Lakes. As I mentioned, it's anyone who cares about Three Lakes, especially the future of your community. And it's anyone who contributes time, talent, or resources for Three Lakes. I'd like that Carl mentioned, resources. They might be kind of bold to say, or even ask someone eventually, but do you really need those 4 parcels? Can you sell them to us cheap to do this project? Or might it be to your advantage to give them away, to make our community a better place? You actually have an abundance of leaders. You have an abundance of organizations that are active and care about Three Lakes. The challenge is to organize and collaborate. I think Forward Three Lakes is a good example. It's based on collaboration. So to realize your visions, you need to learn about the challenges and opportunities you face, accept your differences and your shared values, goals, and aspirations, but find where they are in common. Set that shared vision and build it. You are the stewards of your community, your lakes, and everyone who visits, lives, and works in Three Lakes. So on the right, you can see a map of the lakes, the chain, and reaching over to Thunder Lake and Rice Lake and others. And just as the lakes are connected, whether the chain is connected by channels or just connected by water systems, being part of the North Woods, the many organizations and other assets of Three Lakes are connected in many ways. Beginning a year ago, Three Lakers started to list all the assets in the community. We use the community capitals framework to categorize those assets, and those 7 categories are shown in the lower left insert, and they're listed among the lakes. The purpose of mapping assets is to see what resources you already have and how they can be applied to your projects. This map on the left shows the relationships among the 107 assets already on the list. The map is online and interactive, and as people work with the map, it will become more detailed. And as people want to work with the map, you can work with me and we'll learn how to use it more and more together. So here's some examples of how the asset map can be used. We know Three Lakes wants to support entrepreneurs. The Chamber of Commerce is a business resource. On the left, we see all the assets that are directly related to the Chamber of Commerce and entrepreneurs. The Chamber and entrepreneurs have a red circle around them. So we look at that map and we can ask, are there more assets in the community to add to this picture? And how can the Chamber use the relationships it has to support entrepreneurs more, since that's our goal? On the right map, we see all the assets directly related just to the Chamber. And looking there, we can ask, is the Chamber connected to enough resources to do all that we expect of it? And to answer those questions, we collaborate. So here's some pictures of what collaboration might look like. So you set a goal, like the Thunder Lake Overlook. You read the asset map. You look at the list of groups that there are in the community, and you gather people and individuals from those groups that represent the assets you already have in town to get that overlook funded, designed, and built. We color-coded them in this example because some will be primary leaders. Some need to be consulted at key moments. Others need to be kept informed. Another example is using the wayfinding markers, the badge image concept. You want to get those markers up? It might not take a long time. Check the asset map and get people who bring assets to that project together. And you might want to invite people who both have needs to be found, to be included in that wayfinding. And you might have people that bring resources like the Fab Lab. And you'll also want to think of all the resources that they have in their networks. So always reaching further beyond. Another third final example here, housing is the tough one. It's challenging in all but the high-end markets, and it's very hard in Three Lakes. So you look, who has a stake in good homes for everyone? Everyone who works and wants to live in Three Lakes. As the Housing Task Force has already started to do, you draw those people together and identify who's going to be a primary leader, who are you going to consult, and who are you going to keep informed. And as I mentioned earlier, always looking at reaching out another layer or two in your networks. So to say the obvious, and to repeat some of what we said before, the lakes are why Three Lakes is where it is. The natural environment has provided you an economy and identity since settlement and logging. It provided the economy and identity through farming and resort tourism. The lakes continue to draw new people, and the unique chain of lakes draws people to the town of Three Lakes. The lakes are the key to your future, and you are the key to their future. That holds whether you are a longtime resident, a new resident, seasonal resident, or visitor. Everyone is a lake leader. So we want to think of how to go about this process. Implementation is planning. That's what's next. And planning is actually simple when you get down to it. You collect ideas and information. We've given you a lot. And you get a lot more when you get the final report, a booklet. That'll come out in a month or so, probably January, given the holidays. Todd Johnson will take the lead on that. I'll help, and we'll be tugging on the sleeves of the other team members to get all the information together, much more than we could put in this presentation, and give that to you in a booklet form. And you have your own ideas. I see someone mentioned that there's a lot of conversation already going on in the Facebook chat. You've got your own ideas. So you gather those ideas. You gather the information that you'll need to make good decisions and to develop those ideas. You organize the ideas and the information, and then you develop alternatives. And I make that plural, alternatives. It's important to look at more than one possibility for how to do something. If you only look at one, we tend to go down rabbit holes and miss other opportunities. So I say always look at 3, 4, 5, and see what the problems and benefits of each are. You develop those alternatives, then you evaluate them. Which is going to meet our criteria of housing, affordability, quality, character, etc. And then you select the alternative you're going to develop. We mentioned the shared vision many times, and Todd read it. The sort of preamble, the overall. We have it's on the website. It's on the Facebook page. You can download it. The whole thing is about 2.5 pages. And we include share vision specifically to the 5 major topics we addressed of housing, downtown, growth and development, the natural environment, and leadership. Make that shared vision your own. That can be a separate development process. Talk it out with other friends, neighbors, business people that you work with, because that shared vision can be your guiding star. We had hundreds of you completed the community survey. That helped inform the shared vision. 30 people participated in 20 focus group sessions, some of them in multiple sessions. Their depth of participation informed the shared vision. We reviewed that with the Forward Three Lakes team and refined it to bring it to the point where we felt confident in giving it to the community to say, okay, now work with this, make it your own. And that is how you can kind of align. People that work with me a lot know this bottom graphic in various incarnations. I strongly believe in the possibility, the power of a shared vision. Too often on the left end, when there's no vision, everybody's just going off in their own direction, unconnected. There's not much energy going on. It's pretty blah. Sometimes we get a great leader or something happens that we get an imposed vision. And though everybody is still kind of going off in their own direction, has their own understanding of the future, we don't talk about what we agree on, where we're in alignment, that imposed vision tries to drag everyone along with it. You aren't going to get very far very fast. The next is what I call buy-in vision. We often have a great leader again, or a group of people say, you know, here's the vision. This comes often in workplaces because they're hierarchical, and you know, some level of high management may decide, or the business owner decides, this is our vision, and this is why I want you to buy into it. That can work. It creates some more alignment. There's at least some conversation there, and you get a little bit more alignment, so you can get some greater progress, and it can happen fairly quickly. On the far right side, shared vision, to be honest, it takes longer to get that truly shared vision together. But when it is, and everybody's going in the same direction, you've got your energy aligned, you all know where you're going to go, you can get much further. You can achieve more and achieve better if you've done that groundwork of getting to the shared vision. So we had, in all this presentation, some major concepts that we'll leave you with to try and sort this out as you think of what's next. We talked about front yard, backyard. Downtown is your front yard, Maple Lake is your backyard. Life cycle housing. Homes that are appropriate for every stage of the life cycle. And taking advantage of the life cycle of every home. Some buildings can be rebuilt, repurposed, some may need to be replaced. Building for a year-round economy. Start with the small experiments. That will give you the community that can support more new people. They bring their jobs. You're going to get, by hook or by crook, we'll figure out the internet. So everybody that needs it can have the kind of internet service to work from home, or attract new businesses and take advantage of what you have and be more useful to your visitors. And that year-round economy is going to be families that will support and keep your schools going, and be the future of Three Lakes. We talked a lot about Cy Williams Park. It's currently the diamond in the rough, and I think it's going to be the diamond in your crown. And finally, that the lakes are everything, and that all Three Lakers are stewards of your land and water. Next steps, well, this is what we're going to start talking about tomorrow evening. And I invite you to join us. We'll have the link later. But we're going to, in the report, we're going to mark those things that are fairly easy and can happen quickly. We'll give those the cheddar goldfish cracker stamp. The midterm projects are a little more challenging. We'll get the panfish stamp. And those long-term challenging projects will have the elusive muskie stamped on them. And you look at these drawings and it's just, they look so complete, and especially when they're digital, they look so done. And you all know it's not going to happen at once. So we'll look at this sequencing and figure out, and that's also part of the shared vision, that we don't all get what we want right up front, but we know where we're going, and we look what it's going to take to get us there in the long run. And as I mentioned before, we'll be preparing and passing on to you a summary report. So the first step to take action is to join us tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. And that's going to be a big Zoom meeting. And the location is here on the slide. It's also, I believe, on the Facebook page. If you have pencil and paper now, and I suggest you get it for the link I'll give you in a moment to join us for discussion with the design team. A lot of them are ready and waiting and eager to talk with you for however long we can yet this evening to answer your questions and give you more information about the presentation. But tomorrow night, it's at www.untitled bit.ly/go3lakes. So it's bit.ly/go3, the number 3, lakes. bit.ly/go3lakes. So meet us there tomorrow evening, and we'll get in small groups so you can talk about which projects you want to start working on, whether it's short, medium, long-term, easy, complex. We'll start those conversations tomorrow. Finally, thank you. Thank you for an hour and 49 minutes. We try to squeeze as much into this as possible and keep it as brief as possible, but we're twice as long as we had hoped. There's so much here. There'll be more in the report. But to help you sort things out, join us here in a few minutes. Come into our Zoom meeting, and that is www or https, again, bit.ly/design3lakes, and it's design, DESIGN, number 3, lakes. I'll keep this up so you can see it, and with that, I'll say good evening for the presentation, and I look forward to seeing you in our Zoom meeting and joining the design team members to talk about it. We'll have breakout rooms where by topic, you'll be able to go into a topic breakout room, and you'll be able to go between breakout rooms too. So I'll see you in a minute and welcome you into that Zoom meeting. Thank you. And on behalf of Design Wisconsin team, thank you so much for the opportunity to get to know 3 Lakes and celebrate all that you can be. Bye.